and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Both meeting to order. Approval of agenda of flexibility.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Dave. I'll second it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Let's just skip down to that. Highway Department contract workshop.
Sure. I wasn't sure if the highway superintendent portion was part of it, but I guess if anybody from the public isn't familiar with a work sessions are allowed to bring everybody together to spend a little bit more time on things that maybe can't be handled in just a regular meeting time. There won't be any action taken today, but it allows you to, or us, or everyone to facilitate discussion that might help us in how we're going to move forward. So one of the things I did take a quick look at, and I want maybe the public and also the commissioners to know, is I kind of evaluated 3 different options for what you're going to do with your highway superintendent, highway department. And it could look, there's 3, but you could design it in a different way, and it would be up to your decision to decide what's going to meet the needs of your county and what best serves you. Part of that, I think, needs to be take a deeper look into the cost evaluation of it. And I did get some information, but I didn't get too far into that. But I just want to kind of talk about the 3 options that I came up with. So one of them would be to what you've traditionally done, hire a highway superintendent and manage the highway department. I didn't have like costs on, one of the things I think you could look at is what is the cost per mile of road to maintain if you do it yourself? And I can help you come up with, the calculation or a spreadsheet to determine what that is if you haven't done that in a couple of years. Normally that is something that's handled by a highway superintendent. I don't know how good of records that you have if you haven't had a highway department, but I would say typically, the secretary, maybe it's fell on your desk a little bit. So this can be hard, but I would say just evaluating those costs. What does it cost, per mile of road, and then knowing your road, knowing your number of miles of road, you can come up with a cost on what that is costing the county or would cost the county if you did it internally. The second one, and I know this isn't going to be popular, but it was an idea presented by Department of Legislative Audit, so I'm going to share it with you. So it wasn't my idea, but they talked about neighboring counties, because you can do intergovernmental contracts, so you can do government to government work and you don't have to bid that. They talked about splitting the county into east, west, and north, and having your neighboring county superintendents kind of oversee those areas of road. We see intergovernmental sharing in other counties, for example, Fall River, auditor, treasurer, and register of deeds. They do that for Ogallala, Dakota County. So same people holding those positions, but they do that work for them. So it happens in South Dakota, and it's not unusual, I'd say. I know that might not be popular. I think some of the negatives of that is, what is your role in that and what control you have? If you end up having, say, Jackson County handling the north side, and maybe their specifications are something different than what you would do, or maybe you don't like how it's being handled, what kind of control do you have as the county over that? Have you put on pressure? Because essentially, you're voted by the people who live here, and so are you going to come, is our work going to come in second? Again, how well you design your contract with them, it all goes back to the contract. But it was an idea put out there by Department of Legislative Audit, so I wanted to share it with you, although I didn't really anticipate that being the direction you would go. And then 3 would be to contract out all of the work of the department, which is what you've, I think, done for the last year or last 2 years. There's a couple questions that arise, from the standpoint of, and maybe you already know this, maybe I just needed to have a conversation with Mary, but I'm wondering how the IRS considers, like, is the Whipple Contracting, are they an employer or an independent contractor of the county? And is it a public improvement or is it providing a service? And there's a 20-page questionnaire from the IRS, but knowing those things is going to help you design your contract, I would say. So we would really need to identify those things. That might take a little bit more work, and I can direct you or work with Sarah on some of those things, but I think those questions need to be answered. And then with the current contract, state law does have a provision that allows you to extend a contract. Like in this case, I think what I understood from the last meeting is maybe no work is happening right now because the contract expired. And so typically within 12 months, and I can get you the codified law on that if you need it.
We don't have a contract. There's a bid, but there's never a contract.
Okay. And I read the bid as kind of as you guys accepting that as the contract.
Right. But
So I guess what I'm saying on that is you can extend a contract as long as the contractor would agree to keeping the same rates. So we see that on projects where a project might run over if the contractor will continue to do the work. But again, that's typically done within a 12-month time frame, and we're past that. So I would definitely want to, and I understand not having a contract. I think when you advertise for bids and the bids were accepted, the way I understood that is you were accepting that bid as the contract. And I guess, so I just want you to know that typically there is a provision in state law that would allow you to extend that until you can rebid a contract. But it's most of the time limited to within 12 months, and we're past that. So I don't know what options you have there. I guess my point being, I understand that there's, like optimum moisture, I think is what they call it, in the dirt and the road to be able to work the roads and have it do well for you. And I know that every day that passes, it's getting drier, and you might end up in a situation where some of the subgrade or even have to re-gravel areas that normally would have just been a maintenance item, they become more of an issue the longer you let them go without maintenance. So I understand that time is of the essence to get this worked out, but I also want you to understand that I feel like getting the best solution for you isn't something that me or Sarah or you all can do. It's not something we're going to be able to probably figure out today. And so, again, happy to help you through the process, but I just want to be upfront with you that I don't know that we're going to have a solution today. So I'm going to go into then, the contract side of things. I read the public notice that was put out last year, because I did ask the question, if you were able to do this last year, what stops you from doing just a new version of what you did last year? And I think when we talked through some of the specifics, I really think it's the actual specifications of what you desire as a county are missing. And so I kind of just wrote, as I was reading through that, the questions that came to mind that I don't think can be answered by what we currently have on paper. And I think you as the county should work towards answering those questions through, if you're going to contract the work out, there's more questions that need to be answered. And I think if I was a contractor and I read the notice, the first thing I really looked at is, it seemed like there should be a supplement. There should be something more telling me the how, like how many miles, the length, the width of the road, the crown desired in the middle of the road, just different things like that. So do you want me to roll into some of those things and discuss those things that I thought I needed answers from the county on? Is that going to keep rolling? So one of the first things I wondered about is it common practice in Bennett County when you're doing the roads to leave a small maintenance windrow to be able to reutilize that gravel.
We're doing away with that.
You're doing away with
Yeah,
them.
we don't want no windrow off to the side.
Okay. So I'm just.
I don't anyway, I don't know what the rest of you.
Yeah, a lot of times that windrow is left to be able to work it back through when there's like small depressions and things like that. And so I didn't know if Bennett County had a policy, if that's something that's up to the individual highway superintendent, or if you have a preference, but you're saying no to a.
I don't. I go to other counties and they don't have it.
Okay.
Are you familiar with that LTAP thing?
Yeah.
Does it call out anything on that?
I learned a lot from it. So it does say that it is by region, and a lot of times they will defer back to whatever a specific highway department has. And the reason for that is, what it really sounds like is the knowledge of the supervisor and then the skill of the operator are really huge components. So if you have an unskilled operator, being able to reutilize, or if you have, if your gravel product isn't of good quality, it's harder to, the maintenance windrow doesn't do what it should, because as you're dragging that back, it just, a lot of times it ends up being dust, or it loses its plasticity, some of the characteristics of it. So, and I can get into that later, because I don't know that question either, if you're testing or having whiffle test the gravel at all. But it's typically 3 parts, and then, whatever your aggregate is. I would say it is, I believe it's a state specification to have the gravel tested, but maybe you guys know that better than I do, if it's required or not. I did ask the question to South Dakota LTAP because I wasn't sure if it was something that is set by the state, or if it is something that is up to the individual county department to decide.
And you found out that it was.
I haven't really heard an answer back yet from them, but if they get it back, my recommendation would be is if there is a state standard or specification for testing gravel, you're gonna wanna do that. And so, well, I'll admit highway matters are not my expertise, but we do deal a lot with public infrastructure. And one of the things that I've seen, I've been doing this job for 19 years, is many times our local governments will take the cheaper capital costs today on a project because they feel like they're saving money. But over the course of time, it ends up costing them more money because it doesn't hold up, or they've got to replace it sooner. And so gravel is the same way. If you test your gravel and you get a good quality gravel product, it should hold up, and you should be able to, if you want to, utilize a maintenance windrow to be able to roll that back through and, kind of fix some of the smaller things that don't require a new upgrade. But there are other elements that are going to play into that. It's your crown, so allowing, and I think the standard is 4%. But if your crown is done well and allows proper drainage, and then if you're maintaining your ditch and you don't have high shoulders, those 2 things are also going to play into it. So let's just say if you aren't able to maintain your mowing and keeping it free from debris, and if your shoulders are high and you don't drain appropriately, what could be happening, maybe the reason you would want to abandon that practice is if you're dragging in a bunch of vegetation and grass and stuff, then it just has to be pulverized, right? It's going to require extra equipment. So there might be a reason why. And if you're not able to manage your ditches or manage your crown and your drainage, all of those things play into it. So I would say that it's definitely, county roads are definitely a sign.
They would leave that across approaches. So if you had a truck or something, you'd have to run over them. I mean, there was several reasons.
Oh, yeah, so people can't exit their driveways, or it's not, okay, yeah, and that can be damaging to vehicles.
But there were several reasons why.
Okay.
Like you're talking about, some roads it probably would be a good thing, others not so much. So that would be something that would have to be determined on.
Yeah. So and again, I think it's the specifics that we're lacking for me. And if we can come up with what the county wants, then it's very easy, or it's easier to come up with a specification. couldn't just write you something because I didn't know what your specifications are. So, so is it the general consensus that you would do away with that, or that you would specify areas where it was required and areas where it's not?
I do personally.
If they can use it, or we go back within a day or two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing, the timing, like when can they get back to it to utilize it? I think what's
And you
happened
can
in the past
specify that.
where it's been done, but it's just, they didn't get back to utilize it, and then it becomes a hazard versus a help.
Sure, yeah.
Then it holds water on your road if you don't.
That's the main problem.
Yeah, and that drainage is really imperative to being able to keep.
So I guess, I don't know what you guys think on that, just on that one specific, if the maintenance windrow can be utilized within a week or something, it can be done, or just stay away from it.
How many can you go to that have one?
I'll keep an open mind, so I, that's what you guys want, so just so we can move forward.
Let's just leave that one right now.
Leave it on not kept.
Well,
Not that one, just leave it, yeah, for that. Just
I think not do a maintenance windrow, sounds like.
for now. Maybe we'll do something on it.
Well, you got gravel on most of the roads you got good enough gravel to utilize that. Like,
It does say one of the negatives is that it can restrict, if you have it there, it can restrict drainage. So that is a known negative to having one. It's more so if you are able to reutilize that gravel, if it hasn't been lost, and be able to push it back through, it's less that you have to haul in place later. So the idea is that it could maybe save you costs.
I don't think most of our roads have the quality of gravel to do it.
Okay.
Because you have dirt in it, you get a rain, and also you got sunflower sprout in it.
Okay. All right, so the next one, I mentioned this briefly, is the crown. Is there a specification that you all like to use for, I mean, a lot of times it's a 1/2 inch of crown per foot of width. So typically that ends up being a 4%. And 4% is what would be recommended, like in the manual and stuff, that would be the standard. So if you want to default to the standard, you could. The question I have though is if you choose to include that in your specification and that is required, the thing that you're going to need, the question I would have for you is, are you going to require crown gauges mounted in the grader that's being used, or who? Is it somebody from the county? Is it one of you? Who's checking that after the fact? Are you just openly trusting that whoever's doing the job, that they know what that is and that they're able to accomplish that? Because again, being able to accomplish that really does come back to the skill of the operator.
That would be one of the duties incumbent upon a properly hired and retained highway superintendent.
I think you're right. That is almost always the person who would be responsible for that, or someone within the department could check that grade.
I think to tell you, the road's between 2% and 3% right now.
Okay. And
And
is it for a reason? Is that specific to your area, or is it just that's what you're able to maintain?
when they started pulling it up and blading in, I told them I wanted a nice crown on it.
Okay.
And I think one of the operators had a slope scale and his was saying it was at 2.5% to 3%, and it drains nice, and
Okay.
it works.
And it can be a safety thing too, because then it goes into your shoulder and your ditch. So, and a lot of times you don't have the width or the amount of public right of way you need to be able to achieve that. So if you feel like 2 or 3% is good, do you want, I mean, is it 2 or is it 3? Do you care? Maybe in between 2 and 3%.
I'd say between 2 and 4, actually.
2
Yeah,
and
that's
4.
what I was thinking.
2 to 4.
So I'm kind of trying to think through this. If you had a situation and you said between 2 and 4, and say 2% works in some areas, but in others it doesn't, would you require them then to come back and fix it if it wasn't treated properly?
I think if you get any type of crown whatsoever, it will drain.
Okay.
It's as long as it's got a crown.
Probably also depends on how wide your road's gonna be.
Right.
The width of your road can make the difference in crown. If you have a narrower road, you ain't gonna use it, you know.
And you can write it a 1/2 inch of crown per foot of width, if you wanna do that, because if there's a lot of variation between the width of your road, that would be fine too. The percentage might change a little bit based on the width of your road. Again, that is identified in the LTAP manual, so the 4% is pretty standard. So you would want the spec to read between 2% and 4%, or would you want it to be that 1/2 inch of crown per foot of width? And then,
That's the way I would lean, I guess, I don't know what everyone else is thinking, yeah.
Who are you using for a properly licensed design engineer to come up with these questions that you're asking? Because we face liability issues up here.
I'm sorry, what?
We face liability issues up here.
You do, actually, as a county. So I'm not a licensed engineer. You have told me, your county has told me that you use Bros Engineering for all of your bridge work. I did reach out to Bros Engineering to see if this type of specification is something they would write for you, and they felt like it crossed the line. They felt like that was more getting into the management of the county, but they weren't closed off to it entirely. So what we could do is we could do the bulk of the work by collecting the information from you, draft something, and we could have them review it. There would probably be an expense to the county. The other place that you can send it is, I believe, South Dakota LTAP, and they've been out here a few times, but they would likely be willing to review it, if you're open to that. And they have engineers and highway superintendents that work for them. So you're absolutely right. The county does have liability, and you do want to make sure that your roads are managed in a way that isn't, that you're not at fault for something that might happen on them. The one thing I would say though is most county roads, for like the maintenance part of it, most of our rural counties in South Dakota are not using an engineer for, the everyday maintenance of the roads. So the questions I'm asking really did arise from the manual that's put out from the state, the South Dakota LTAP on gravel roads. So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, keep going. I'm just watching people dig their hole deeper.
The manual, the safe side is referenced in the manual because that we know is safe. When we run into trouble with me trying to reinvent the wheel to some extent on that manual, right? But I do understand that it doesn't fit every scenario perfect.
Yeah, and I think,
but it does probably cover 95%.
Yeah, so the manual is put together by people who have served as highway superintendent. Many of them have 30 or 40 years in the department, and they do have engineers. It is through SCSU, so there are civil engineers. It's not like I'm not pulling it out of thin air, I would say.
Can we keep it just simple and reference the LTAP manual?
You can, and there's actually other, so the manual references other manuals that actually have specifications in them. And I did notice the example I provided from Henderson County, they just referenced I think it's the AASHTO manual, which is a manual that is used for specifications for county roads. So, and we can delve into that. I can work with Sarah on that, just to make sure that if we're referencing it, the county can then follow it. And I think that's my bigger concern for you is you can write the specification and you can bid it and you can get a bidder. It kind of goes back to who's going to hold that contractor accountable. If you don't have a highway person, is it Mary? Is it Blue? Is it is it all of you? Whose job is it to make sure that that it's being carried out the way that you're writing it? And I don't know the answer to that.
I believe statute answers that
It does.
very clearly. Without superintendent, there is none. End of conversation. Without contract, there is no work. End of conversation. That's just statute.
What statute is that?
As far as
on the opposite ground,
It's one that,
so there's the specific specific duties of the, and we had the conversation, I don't know if we figured it out or not, but, so counties
So-
may employ a superintendent,
I guess,
right?
we go that, but I guess the one is that 31/12/17 superintendent approval of bills before payment. All bills for road construction work on county highway systems shall be filed in itemized form and certified by the county highway superintendent before being allowed by the board of county commissioners and warrant and payment thereof drawn by the county.
So, I guess in my opinion, if you're going to contract out your work, your highway work, you must have a highway superintendent. If we're gonna do everything in-house, we don't necessarily need a highway superintendent. That's where the may comes in. But the must is, if we're gonna be approving invoices for work done on our roads, we must have a highway superintendent.
Would you like to weigh these? These are your state laws you're looking for.
Sure, is this an extra copy?
No, it's not.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we went back and forth. I don't know, did you reach out to anybody else as far as, because we both interpreted this a little bit different.
Right. I've talked to the Assistant Attorney General that has been assigned to help the different counties a few different times.
And that's his interpretation for her.
And he originally thought that the may, and then when I explained it, he's like, yep, I can see that. And so,
So he didn't give a,
oh no, never.
and I felt like I got the same from legislative body. I don't know, Rod Fortin, but
To me, the may is giving authority to the county commissioners to hire that person.
yeah, and typically in law, if it's a may, it's not requiring you. If it's a shall, you have to.
So what happens if your superintendent quits?
Yeah, exactly.
The county cannot come to a stop. The superintendent can't quit, or you cannot find a superintendent. The county cannot come to a stop.
And so I think that there's some understanding for that. However, we've been without a highway superintendent for over a year.
Right under you.
It's time. You're never gonna find somebody that's perfect. We've had applicants, it's time.
And that's why
so
it
that
passed
we
over
can keep
today.
the county moving.
There's one law that says may, there's 5 that says shall.
I will say my interpretation was that, and I think I'm just going to default to Sarah on it because she's the intern. But my first interpretation of what that is, if you choose to hire a superintendent, then they must do these things. She saw it the other way, as in, if you're choosing to do these things, you must hire a superintendent to do them. So, and I don't know if the order of the way that they're listed, matters or not, but it's not uncommon for state law to not agree with itself.
Can you offer your site on that, please?
Do you want to give these? Yes.
No, I want site, case law, Supreme Court.
Oh, I wouldn't do that.
I'm looking
It
for
doesn't
facts.
necessarily, so codified law isn't always determined by Supreme Court. Codified law is just what codified law is.
Yes, so moving forward on the contract, if we could keep going maybe on that. how we
Sure,
could-
yeah, we'll keep moving forward. Again, my question, and it will keep coming back to this decision of to have a highway super or not, because there's multiple times in here,
So-
I ask the question of whose job is it if you
Who's
don't
policing
have it?
it,
Yes.
basically, yeah.
So, so maintaining the shoulders is part of the contractor you want it to be. Is there any kind of standard for, high shoulder or what they call a secondary ditch? I mean, and
Sometimes we are gonna run into a scenario where the ditch is higher than the road, right? I mean, there's places that are that way.
Not too many, but there's some.
Yeah, so how do we handle that with, is that like a road improvement?
That would be a road improvement that we would.
Not be part of this contract, or would it be part of this contract?
Well, not improvement, you're just repairing the road. It's called maintenance.
Yeah, if you need to pull it up, that would be maintenance, or no, if you're pulling it up, that's, maintenance is.
So are we gonna?
Wait, maybe we should figure this out first. What is the definition of maintenance and what's the definition
rebuild.
That's actually in here, so to clarify quickly.
Is that all right?
So, removing bad material, a re-gravel is more than routine work. So if you have to re-gravel an area or fix a subgrade, that is more than routine maintenance. I don't know that the manual did not have anything specific about, so maintaining shoulders is typically considered maintenance, but anytime that you have to add additional material, gravel, yeah,
Not dirt.
gravel, not dirt, okay, yeah. So then, let me just go back to,
So there's some gravel, that was, there's a wall, so we put all this dirt up here and make crown and that's maintaining a bunch of gravel.
Rebuild.
I would think that rebuild would be if you're going from the total ditches and pulling it all the way up.
That's maintenance of the road.
yeah, so that,
Maintenance is if you're doing the sides, just pulling up a little bit, but if you're
I
going
think
all
it
the way.
goes back to that, I think maybe that's the idea behind that maintenance windrow is, so any recovered material from high shoulder that can be used is going to obviously need more than one pass, but you can reuse that if you're pulling it in, it's good gravel and there's no issues with it. That's going to be considered maintenance.
You're right,
If you have,
just that 3 foot, like you want to use a reclaim.
Right.
But if you go down below that and you're pulling up sod,
then you're going to need to probably to pulverize it too. You're going to need to break that up. Or it's going to be best practice to break that up. But if you,
If you're pulling up the whole road, you're gonna re-gravel it anyway, you're not gonna re-grade the road.
right,
So if you're pulling it up to build the road up, that's gotta be
a rebuild.
a rebuild. It can't be maintenance. If you're just blazing the road or pulling the shoulders up, that's maintenance,
Right.
in my thoughts.
If you're gonna do 3 foot, that's maintenance. If you're gonna go all the way down the toe, then it's a rebuild.
Okay.
And there's gonna be some roads that need rebuild, but they're just gonna get maintenance.
How do we put that in our specification?
yeah, so I actually brought maps and one of the questions I had when reading through is, I didn't feel like it was clear, to the bidder, to me or to anybody on, one, what are the number of miles of road and what are the priorities? And typically, I think the priorities are established by a highway superintendent, if you guys want to do that work. But most often, counties cannot afford to do everything every year. And so you have maintenance and then you establish, I think you have 3 projects listed. But I did bring maps, so maybe you know where the worst areas are and if they need more attention. I think in our conversations, I did say, if you're doing project work that's considered more than general maintenance, those should be bid separate. Just so you know how much gravel was placed there and the year and the length of road, and if it's a rebuild, it does go beyond just general maintenance. So your contractors bidding on, that submit bids, they would know that, okay, this would be separate. We're not going to have to do any work that's above and beyond general maintenance or regulating. So I guess I still have the question of maintaining the shoulders, and then is there going to be any kind of obligation to correct a high shoulder or remove a secondary ditch high shoulder so that it falls in line with the grade of your road for drainage, or is it just mowing and pulling the shoulders?
Put that to the 3 foot deal. If there's a road like this, but we don't have roads like that.
To me, it just keep it simple, maintaining what's existing, keeping it as in a condition as it is, or better. And if the shoulders need to be pulled or the road is really wide, it needs to be separate project, you know?
To a certain degree. I mean, that's what I'm saying, how many feet we're gonna allow.
I guess it
Is
would be
it
a
something we should come back to maybe, or is there I'm gonna say a specification?
Do you have a recommendation or specification, I guess, that is there anything that you're leaning towards that?
Well, and again, typically you just want, it should allow for proper drainage, and if you already don't have that, you can't put that on the contractor, you know.
Right.
But you would then need, as the county, to identify those areas that you know need more work, and I would list them out, you know, figure out a way to prioritize them. Sometimes your priority just goes based off of, in a given year, what 2 or 3 areas could you afford? Or, you know, you might not be able to do all of them you're not gonna be able to do all of them. But I would say those areas maybe that are in the worst condition, due to lack of drainage, you might not be able to get.
So could the specifications read in the contractor that in areas of improper drainage, ditch drainage, they shall be identified to the Board of Commissioners and taken on individually or something?
I think you need to be careful with the duties of a highway superintendent and the prohibited duties of a county commissioner.
They would have to report it. I mean, I think having them report it so you know, unless, and also the residents can report areas that are bad, and you can need somebody to maintain them.
So once they're reported, what do we do with the specification? To identify that as a call out and that. I'm just trying to move past it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I don't like general language because I feel like there's room for confusion, but you could just say, you know, keeping secondary ditches to a minimum, or, because I don't, if you are, sorry, high shoulders to a minimum, I don't think they're gonna have the time to be able to correct. If you said there's a lot of them.
I don't think there's a lot of them.
Just on your
Is there?
minimum main road.
And maybe it's not the job of this, maybe that's not what you want the focus to be, and you could just say that that's not part of this contract. I mean, maintaining the shoulder
Just
would be,
maintain them with all.
There you go, yeah, I'd say probably, that's a way to move forward.
Maintain proper drainage.
You have one question on the whole deal though. Why can't you do your whole contract with, you're gonna re-gravel 10 miles of road within this, and that be specified and do it all in the same contract? Why would you have to do 2 separate? If you only got X amount of miles, you're gonna rebuild every year.
Could that be a separate project?
Yeah.
you can include it, and, I mean, you can write your specification in your bid notice for whatever work you need done. I just think if you want a competitive bid process and you're saying this is a contract for maintenance, county highway maintenance, it says specifically in the manual that anything that requires, you know, re-gravel or build up, that goes beyond regular maintenance. I think if you're going to include it, you can, but you would just need to call it out, and you're gonna have to have things like, you know, the specification for the gravel and the location from this point to this point. All of that needs to be explicitly spelled out so that people know what it is they're bidding on.
So if we focus on the maintenance one, we can always identify 1 or 2 projects that we think rebuilds that we could do this year to put in there as well, potentially.
And you can do those as an addendum too, so
So then that-
the one thing so they can put in their bid for the maintenance, and then if
There you
there's
go.
enough dollars, so we haven't got to this part yet, but we're halfway through the year and you're held to whatever your budget is. So I would encourage you to, if you go out and bid the rest of the year, and then maybe starting in January, you're gonna need to do something a little bit different, but for the rest of the year, what is your budget left? If let's just say it's 300,000 and you get bids and all of them are exceeding that, especially if you do those project areas, they might have to be delayed till the following year.
I think that's the way to do that. We focus on the maintenance one and then addendums on the road.
And so then they would submit a separate bid, you would know that exact, or a separate bid item or or under the addendum, and it would tell that exact cost, so they would be telling you what is it. You might end up with the maintenance contract is low, but then the projects are higher. So you could accept a low bid on the maintenance contract, it would, because it's the lowest bidder, but fees might push them over, and then you would just know you would need to either bid those separately. Or you might see that the maintenance contract is higher, but because they're here doing the work, they can do projects A, B, and C, or these addendums, and it would maybe fit within your budget for the year. So, but I think somebody needs to identify what those project priorities are, like on a map and say the length and.
Kind of got a road plan or whatever,
Okay.
maybe we just kind of follow that.
How do you propose to incorporate sieve numbers into your specs?
I'm not sure what you're asking. What is it?
Sieve numbers, product control. For example, how many ton per 100 of sand have to be pulled off a product? Or how many ton per 100 ton of split face stone needs to be added into a mix?
So that's back to the testing. And that, like I said, I would encourage that. A lot of, if you have pit run, most of the people owning those are open to you. They do their own tests and they'll usually show that. But if you want to conduct your test independently of them, you could do that to make sure, because a lot of the quality of that is going to depend on how it's pulled from the pit. Scraping off the top and just getting, and then how it's handled before it gets to being actually laid out on the road. There's I'm going to say a whole science and a whole section explaining how important it is on how that pit is maintained and how it's pulled from there.
Unfortunately, I think we're kind of past that point this time because we already own the gravel and kind of got to use what we
So
have.
you have gravel. Oh yeah, so they're just pulling, you have,
We have gravel, it's already owned, it's already been bought.
Spring gravel.
so you're using your own, that's fine.
We've kind of got to use the stuff up that we've already bought.
Yeah, and is that enough to finish the year?
Well, that part carry us 2 years.
2 years, okay.
So at that point, it kind of becomes, I mean, we already own it, we got to use it.
Well,
So-
it doesn't matter. We are very limited in what we got.
Yeah, what you can get.
You know, and I mean,
And when
is it ideal?
Probably
Probably
not,
not, but
it's what we got.
competition.
we got to do what we got.
Only thing we're buying right now is just pit run.
Okay.
Blowouts or.
I'm going to skip forward. The next thing I had was on the mowing. What is the frequency of how often?
Once a year.
Once a year.
So they would cover how many miles of road?
I think the best way to say it's the mail route.
So what?
Mail routes. That's what needs mowed.
Where the mailman drives.
Yeah.
You know, Nebraska does, or Cherry County does. Railroad landline on that road, we have to mow it. You don't mow it, the county will mow it, charge you.
What you do on trust land.
That's the problem.
That's what it used to be back in the 80s, I know.
Really?
Around here?
Our own ditches out there, around Batesville.
What do you do about the trust line?
I don't know what they did with it, but I just know along our land out there, we had to mow the ditches.
I mean, it'd be a huge time savings for us. And cost savings too.
And the people that don't have the mower, we just have to pay the county set price to do it.
Or the neighbor.
Yeah, well, like me, I don't have equipment to run my phone, I do too.
So the way that would work, the landowner that owns land next to that road would be required to mow the ditch then.
So you guys are raising our taxes with an opt-out and gonna supply less services and now have us mow our own ditches? Wouldn't it be easier just to have us all buy our own road graders and just blade our own roads?
I think we're just kind of looking at options, I guess, but.
I'm just putting it out there.
Sure.
I mean, I think we're going in the wrong direction there.
So I think you answered the question of frequency of once per year, and I think that would.
They normally start middle of August. Everything's done growing.
And grow the pheasants, all the birds are hatched.
Okay, so you do want to dictate essentially the time of the test done. Okay, so what would be the time?
August till November.
October,
I don't think it's October, first November.
August 1 to November now?
snows in August.
Yes,
Unless we're gonna,
yes.
yeah,
Again, I mean,
And I think we wanna go to the toe of the ditch. Not just, if some places are, I mean, we need to, it needs to, some places it needs to be more than 8 foot. I mean, it just,
well, back in 16.
Shall be mowed to the toe of the ditch. And you're doing mail routes on that.
you do mail routes, that's gonna,
Pretty much cover all the roads.
right,
No, not some of the secondary roads.
like what though? A secondary road normally got people living on it.
Well, one would be like my road to Jerry Jones. That'd be one road, that's not mail route. Another one would be
But does the county?
your road, like your road back to your place.
I
And then,
can mow my own road.
Right, I know,
That
I
don't
know.
bother me yet, but
But you gotta like undetermined ones, there's several miles that would be on that route.
right. And maybe that's what we could do. That'd save some miles of money. Just do mail routes and then everything else is relied on the landlord.
I don't know if it would make sense for you to just mark, I mean, can you look at a map and know which ones?
At some point, I think you could, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you would just include a map with the specifications as marked on a map or something, or?
So, in one of the examples, it would say like, we're gonna do Elkville Road from, 156th Avenue to 127th Avenue. So, and then it tells the specification of, that's a 40-mile road, or that's 1.5 miles of road.
well, that's gonna be a lot of people.
Well, again, I think you do need to be specific about the mail route, people bidding on that don't know how many miles that is. So if they look at it and they're like, oh, it's 46 miles of mowing, they can put a number to that.
50 miles on the mail route.
Could we get like the post office deal something like the routes?
Yeah, that'd probably be the best one. Or have Mike Hine and
Stewart
Stewart.
and then Cody.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I don't know,
Where you're headed with that is, if we just mark it all down on that map there, you just call it out.
yeah, we
Okay.
can call it out.
Someone willing to mark that on the map for?
I know when Pennington County, did their specs on their last one where it was a hauling place, they included the maps and they just highlighted.
Yep.
So like
That
this.
would be the easiest thing to do.
These guys could,
Yeah.
probably do that. Eight more, too.
I could do a lot of it. Lot of ground, I don't know.
Is erosion control part of the specification?
If it's maintenance,
So we get a heavy rain, a bunch of the gravel washes off into the ditch.
Sorry.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm just asking if that's supposed to be part of, I mean, that is part of the regular maintenance of the highway department, but if it's not something that any county highway department has ever cared about or done, I wouldn't add more tasks to what you.
I think we care about it, because that,
Well, not to interrupt you. Are you talking just on the maintenance side or fixing the
No, just,
maintenance side?
yeah.
Just like the right way I'd like.
so there, I guess, yeah, when you talk erosion, there's the erosion where it washes out a $40,000 culvert. Then there's
that's different, so that's actually going.
That'd be-
Then there's the erosion that just washes some gravel into the ditch,
Right.
which needs to be brought back up.
That'd be called maintenance.
Yes.
Yeah, and, okay, so, yes,
Yes.
Yes.
They might have to haul gravel to fix that, but that would still be maintenance.
so for the intersection of roads and then, like leading up to, are there any cattle guards? Okay, so leading up to cattle guards, are there any rail crossings? And then in regular intersections, normally you would have your crown would be gradually eliminated, so that your intersection is flat, so there's no issue with drainage. Do you have any, and normally you would do 100 feet prior to the intersection, eliminate that crown. I'm gonna say that would be a typical standard. Is that something you've ever specified? Do you care to specify it? So just whatever it is.
Once a year, probably.
Yeah, because if they get in a habit of spilling,
Let me back up here for a minute. Is there anything in the book that says what kind of bird?
Yes, it does. And I'll give you what they say. So normally you eliminate the crown 100 feet prior. You stop the grader 2 to 3 feet before you get to the cattle guard, so you don't end up pushing the gravel into it, allowing cows to just do as they please. Then you would back drag the material away from the structure and use handwork to fill in the edge around the cattle guard. So
What about like cleaning it?
cleaning them out.
So if you do it that way, you shouldn't have to. And if they do it, and it's being supervised when they do, that's on them to clean it out because they.
Yeah, but your vehicles are traffic. Vehicles, yeah,
That makes sense.
over here you're getting some.
It doesn't
Dirt
have
balls.
specific, I know that sometimes you have to.
I know.
Things like that.
I think last year was an argument, well, who took care of the cattle guards? One time it was the highway department, and the highway department said, no. Landlord takes care of it, and the landlord said, no, the highway department will take care of it.
Who owns the cattle guards?
I don't know.
Well, they're
That's a
needed
good
because
question,
the
Bob.
people, they're needed because the people who own cattle.
All right.
I assume the landowner would own the cattle guards, so it should be up to the landowner to clean them, and just by cleaning.
So the county used to maintain the cattle guards. They were county owned, they were taken care of by the county, and Steve Livermont used to clean them out for us at a very cheap rate. That's the way it used to be getting done.
Was he a county employee or?
No, he was a contractor.
Okay.
He put in all of our culverts for an estimated roughly $500 a culvert. Cleaned out our cattle guards for little or nothing, so.
Was he ever a low bid on culvert work?
Yes.
Was that common that he was low bid on culvert work?
He was the only bidder for a while.
Thank you.
I guess I have more questions now. Is cleaning the cattle guards is that the county's job, and if so, is that part of the specification?
I think that could be up to the landlord, so.
Follow what they do. And we're probably, we didn't even make a statement on that. Public
How
record.
many cattle guards are in the county?
Well, County Line's got 4. I don't know what's over here. So like east to Crossing Line, there's 1, there's a dozen or more.
Really?
So are they owned by the public, or are they owned by, like landowners, or are they owned by the county?
But that's
The landowner touches them, they take on the liability. And they don't want that.
Part of contract maintenance, make sure cattle guards are cleared out.
once a year.
You could say once a year, or you could call it like if it's within,
A few inches.
like you could call it out. What would that specification, like, so, if there's dirt up within a foot of the bottom of the cattle guard, it's an issue?
Yep.
And they shall,
Well, but some of them probably don't even have that much dump and sand, do they?
I don't know.
Sand hills is gonna be, that probably just flows into there,
Yeah.
right? Like you can't control it.
so, shall take care of the, auto gates, or of the main cattle guard.
So, it talks about like spreading the gravel or equalizing the gravel, how many passes, and then, the layer of thickness. what the manual says is if the topside stone in the gravel, which you would know from your testing is 1 inch, then your layer thickness should be a minimum of 2 inches when you're spreading the gravel. Any thoughts on that?
So what you're getting to is how are we knowing how thick our gravel is on the road?
Yeah, so when you're equalizing or when you're spreading the gravel, if you're asking somebody to do a job, again, they need to know to what standard am I doing the job. So
Yep.
I would say it would be common in the specification to say, you know, what layer of thickness you're requiring as a county. You could probably do as needed, or I don't know, it just makes it pretty subjective. And then, so I think what I worry about for you is if you hire a contractor and there's an argument of you didn't do the job the way we wanted, you know, and then they say, yes, we did, and you say, no, you didn't. How do you prove that if it's not written in the specification of, well, we hired you to do this job to this standard? That's all I worry about. If you feel like that's not
We hired you
necessary.
for 4 inches of gravel on the road, and they say we did, we say you didn't, and you can go out and court it and see that there's only 2.
But are you getting that they're supposed to put 2 inches down first and go back and put 2 more inches, or?
I think it's more about the equal, like spreading the gravel. So let's just say they put 4 inches down because they're allowed to, and they leave it like that. And you guys come out and you're like, yeah, this is not a good job. You failed the test here.
Yep.
But they might say, well, you never had anything in the specification of how it needs to be. You didn't tell me I needed to spread it out. You just told me, you know, I can only put 4 inches on the road at a time. So I just feel like clarifying that will help the contractor again know what is the specification. And if I need to go do some more studying on that, it just basically says.
I would say it'd be 4 inches compacted.
So 4 inches compacted, okay.
That's what you're wanting, is clarification like that.
Something about spreading it out.
How would you determine your fluff factor on that, Mr. Baker?
You wouldn't, you 4 inches compacted. When it's done, you should be able to take out a cord or drive a stake in there and pop it and measure.
Would you be considering requiring a box before gravel is put down, so you begin to quantify your material? I can see where you're going with that. If you have a clear box that's properly crowned, here's your limits. You don't pay attention to ton slips. You pay attention to your actual compacted in-place quantity, and here's your pay item.
So one of the things I would worry about or question, I don't know because I've never ran a grader, but what happens if you spread the gravel too thin? Like, let's just say they bring in a certain amount of gravel and they're like, I just need to get this road done. And so maybe you have a rock size of 1 inch and they're spreading it out so thin, then does it perform as it's supposed to perform? And so I think, you know, yeah, if you're doing 4 inches, and that's great, but if you have 1 inch as your largest rock in your aggregate, and it's being spread out too thin, I think the performance of that is going to be a bit of an issue. And so it's really about the thickness at the end of the process once they've maintained the road. And I would more worry about if somebody's trying to, I don't want to say cut corners, but get more out of less.
Stretch it.
And yeah, like stretching it out, and then it's too thin, and then you.
But then they're held accountable for that.
Well,
But would they be if there's nothing in the specification, like
But that's,
replace the gravel?
but that's more toward the addendum for it.
Okay, so you don't see any issues where, because
If we
again,
got a thin spot and they put some gravel in there and they fix it, but where you're gonna get technical like that would be if they was to rebuild the road.
okay, so you feel like maybe this doesn't matter for just general maintenance?
Right.
Okay, all right, so maybe we can just,
But if you're rebuilding the road, wouldn't it be easier to do so many tons per mile?
Yeah, but that's been now for that agenda for a rebuild. We're worried more on maintenance, correct? That's what we're working on.
Hang on, think about this. I can see where she's going with this. that blowout, I'm not no construction guy. Put more in there to make it right.
That's gonna require more. That might take 8 inches of gravel.
Right, if I can see where she's going, like, well, what he says, you only need to put 4 inches over.
That's why you don't wanna put that 4 inches in there, that is for rebuild.
Right,
And if you're doing maintenance and you got a blowout, you fill it back up to where it matches the road.
that makes sense.
Yeah, and I can maybe read more examples and figure out if that, because I do feel like the equalizing or the spreading of the gravel is general maintenance. It's just where does that come from? A lot of times it's pulled, it gets kicked out with all of the traffic going across it when you're pulling back up and re-spreading it out.
But if you don't have 4 inches to start with,
You would have to place more gravel.
see, and that would be more rebuild if you're adding gravel.
Well, it'll be
Unless it's a blowout and it's a repair. And then if you don't wanna put 4 inches, say that you got a bad spot on the ISO road and there is no gravel, and then you say, well, we want 4 inches of gravel above that, then you're gonna have you just wanna blend it with the existing road.
We can come back to that. I think I probably need to learn more on that. I can't offer any suggestions.
Like Tuck Hill Road, they re-gravelled that or whatever, but then there was heavy traffic and there were spots that the gravel was lighter, it was heavier, and there got to be some spots, So if they maintenance that road, with the contract part of the maintenance, they just go fill those spots where there was no gravel, or they just blade it.
I think you'd have to go plating, because if you're gonna add that much gravel, then that would be a different line item.
Well, you can put some gravel down.
Do your roads ever allow, and are your ditches such that you would be able to, without pulling in vegetation, be able to, pull up the gravel and reuse it when it gets kicked off the site? There's some areas where that,
I think that's pretty much been done.
okay.
I don't think there's any more roads in the county that are wide enough for 4 semis anymore, is there? Black was flat, and that's gotten pulled up out of that kind of shape.
Yeah.
I think that part we're looking. Do you know any, Bob?
But you go back to the blowout deal, it takes a load or two of gravel, that's not gonna be called rebuild.
No.
It's just gonna be called maintenance.
Right.
But like when she's saying that, okay, this contractor might say, well, you need 8 inches to fill this hole correctly, then you're right, and this contractor will say, well, I filled that hole and it's only 2 inches, make it look good. How do you hold the gravel for
So
that?
I think compaction is normally part of a specification. I don't know if you can include that if you don't have somebody who can go, do like compaction testing or check the compaction. I know that was one of the comments I got back from LTAC, is that compaction should be part of the specification.
But here's the problem with the compaction test, if it don't rain for a month, that road changes.
This isn't a freeway, it's just a gravel road.
Yeah.
I don't know what it costs now, I know back in the 90s it was 120 a hole plus mileage.
Okay, I can see where that would not be maybe cost effective to do that on a gravel road. Okay.
Right.
Just to keep it raining, maintained.
Do you require with your maintenance any kind of compaction? Is compaction part of it, or that would only be on a subgrade rebuild or?
Rebuild,
Okay. Dust control, do you require, is that part of the steps? Doesn't matter? Okay. Okay, so do you have standards for your roadway geometry as far as like surface width, the steepness of the 4 slopes and back slopes? Any kind of,
I think that would be back to the rebuild
okay,
on that part.
And that will coincide with what the speed limit is of that road. I think speed limit is kind of, there is specifications, right, that this road's 35 versus 55.
yeah, so, they do talk about that, and they talk about,
105, whatever.
Like four roads for more failing.
are you specifically talking about, yeah, I guess, so you're saying this, do you set the speed limits then? Or,
Yeah, it's 45 to the whole county.
okay.
So that would kind of dictate that road geometry, is what I'm saying.
And then do you know they, what most of your widths are? Or what are they supposed to be if you,
You should be able to, from DOT, find your road geometry with respect to speed limit. You're gonna, for a certain speed limit, your road is gonna be a certain width, and there will be a certain depth of gravel used.
But for maintenance, you're not pulling it up and making the road narrower or wider anyway, but if you're building the road, you gotta have specs on how wide you want it.
So, and the maintenance part, that wouldn't affect that then.
or most of your widths 19, are they 19 foot wide?
Or wider.
Unintentionally?
Yeah.
What's required? What is required?
Unless it's 20 miles.
Do you guys require traffic control for maintenance? Do you require water, especially?
Yes, that's needed. Oh, for maintenance, oh, for
This is
business.
maintenance, so.
Oh, no.
When it's too dry, they don't work when it's here.
Yeah.
So you just don't do the work when it's, okay. Well, that probably saves money.
Yeah, I'll be on the rebuild side. Get rebuild needs.
So do you feel like you need to say that in the specification, that if the roads, if there's not optimum moisture in the gravel, that they can't?
To a point. Like last fall, we ran into that,
The washboards are so bad that
we had to get it just for safety.
What about blowouts?
Blowouts too, you know.
Oh, you'll need water for them.
Right. What did we do last year?
you know, but if I was doing it, I just soaked that gravel down before I hauled it out there.
How would you word that? No blame if it's too dry to a point of safety, public safety.
And that can be determined by the highway superintendent. It's not your duty or her duty.
Bill, your grandpa,
Yeah, that's so.
he ain't coming?
Because we don't have a secretary who does not. So that's what he just told.
That's the message, a little different than that, but this is
Well, I think he didn't, if you have a secretary, I think he would
okay.
be interested, but if you don't, he's not. Because he doesn't want to do the paperwork.
But right now, we just need him to sign off.
If you want to invite him back to our meeting next week,
Yes.
could you do that?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
And just clarify that we're not expecting him to do the secretary part of it.
Right, very clear, he's on the
I've got to the end of my questions of the things I really just didn't know. I still don't know specifically how many miles of road you plan to have maintained. I don't know if this makes it more clear, easier to put that in writing.
Helps a lot. Just need to have a little time to review and just get back to one other thing.
And I would say, I mean, I threw a lot at you. There are just things to think about. I don't even know if you've made a decision that you're going to continue in this direction or do highway super. I think having a county highway department as far as the paperwork side of things, and I know there might be ways that you can structure your highway department where you can find somebody who's like really good at the administrative side of things, and then someone who's really good at the actual road knowing and having the skills. But I think even if you do a bid specification where you're going to contract out all of the physical work that has to happen internally, you're still going to need to figure out someone. And I don't know who that would fall on.
To sign off on what we've done.
Well, that, and then there's a lot of paperwork. You know, it sounds like there's some maybe state money and federal money, and then just, you know, things like load ticket, how much gravel is being placed. Somebody knowing what's been done from year to year, so that, you know, if the public comes back and says, well, my road hasn't been done in 20 years, you can say, well, actually, we did that. Might seem like it, but we did that in 2019 or 2021. So having good records is going to help you make good decisions. That's kind of crucial. And then the other thing, I would be somewhat, I would want the county to have some kind of an idea, and I don't know who can do the math or provide me the information so I can do the math, is I really feel like it would be helpful for you to know how much does it cost for the county to maintain a mile of road? Like, what is the cost for that? Because comparing the cost of you doing it internally versus hiring it out is going to help you. So when we do every other project where we have a bid specification, there's an engineer's estimate of this is what we think the project should cost. I would use your internal numbers, knowing how much does it cost. We want it to be within reason. So if you come up with a number of, you know, whatever, however much per mile is what it costs, you would want those bid specs to at least be within reason. And then the other thing you need to likely have is a maximum limiting amount. You're tied to what funds you have, essentially. So let's just say you have a $600,000 budget for the year and you use 300 just because we're halfway through the year. You're limited to 300,000 for the rest of the year. You don't really have any other way to pay for it if you don't stay within your budget. So that may mean you need to scale back what you're asking a contractor to do for the remaining 6 months of the year. You know, I don't know. I feel like, you know, tempering your expectations for the budget you have is really important so that you're not overspending and having to do supplemental or whatever it is you do to cover that. It's got to come from somewhere. So, but I did hear somebody say something about an opt-out, so I might not be aware. There might be more funds than.
It will be this year.
Oh, okay. So. Well, I've got through all my questions. I probably am walking away with even more, but you had mentioned something about next week. Is that something?
It's a regular meeting.
Well, yeah, next week's a regular meeting.
Okay.
But I did mess up on, because I put a ad in the paper trying to get people to come, but I had the 25th. For some reason, 25th instead of the 11th. So, if you guys wanted to get back together with what she has gleaned today and what we have, and you know, do another workshop, I can leave that out there, or I'll just play with that and say, heck, it's rotate.
When might you be ready to come back with some certain definite plans and specs?
Well, I can give you an example. I think, you know, I probably shouldn't be the one writing it all. I would rely I talked to them, they said they'd been out here a couple times, they just didn't know what you wanted. So I'm collecting this information from you to tell them, okay, this is what I've collected, you know, can a specification be written based off of the information we have? I mean, I think going back to, you know, when I talked to Sarah, and I don't know who wrote the bid notice last year, but to me, when I read it, it just felt like there should be a supplemental or something else you could look at that shows, you know, the map of the road areas. That does allow potential bidders to go drive the area, like Jay was saying, to better understand the conditions if there's specific needs. If you're removing the culverts, that's less of an issue. But once I get everything together, I would go back to, there does need to be some general conditions regarding safety and liability and those things, and I think those are pretty standard, so I can give an example of those. And then I would rely on South Dakota LTAP again, because they have experience, you know, highway supervisors and engineers to ensure that what you're getting, I mean, at least meets your needs. Like, before I do that though, do you anticipate, or, you can't make any decisions here, so maybe I'm asking a question out of pocket, but do you think you're going to move forward in the direction of bidding out the work and then finding some way administratively, internally to handle the extra stuff? Or is there a chance there could be somebody hired or highly, or is that, maybe I'm asking prematurely?
No, I don't think it's a premature question. Statute's very clear on point of what we may and may not do. I guess the question becomes, does the majority of this board wish to comply or violate law? That's very simple to me.
We'll probably know more next meeting, because if Mr. Harris shows up,
Is he a previous super, or, I don't know?
he worked for the county before.
Okay, so he'd be able to provide some historical or institutional knowledge.
Well, we're looking at him as a superintendent to sign off on work that's done. He does not want to do any administrative stuff,
Okay.
but that would get us started. So, they laid this road so many miles, and he can sit there and say, yes, they did. It's to the spec we want. Pay him.
Okay,
That's kind of, I reading the rest of the board, I think that's kind of where we're at.
and then I think the IRS questions that I posted, and I can put those in an email if you want. But I think we should really look at that so that you know that we're meeting from a contract perspective, if there ends up being one, that we know what they are, you know, and how they're classified. Because Department of Legislative Audit said they said, well, this is how we see it, but we're not sure that the IRS agree. So just knowing.
Okay.
Yeah. And I can send those in an email so that we can ponder it or figure it out. Okay. Well, hopefully that wasn't too overwhelming.
No.
I can leave
Good. You guys are good?
the maps.
Bob,
Thank you.
you got anything, Bob?
Yes, I did. And I'm waiting here very anxiously for you to pass out some paper that you received as a gift from our sheriff today.
I'll give it to you freely.
Thank you again for coming
I
down.
do have one thing you guys should consider, at least figure out. You got so many miles of secondary road, so many miles of primary. I know you can't predict rainstorm, you can't predict that, but it should be a minimum of so much work on secondary roads, a minimum of so much on primary.
Right.
You know, whether it's twice a year on a secondary road, 6 times a year on a primary, it has a minimum, someplace for them people to bid
If
out.
we had a superintendent, he would sit there and say, hey, you need to go this road. Wouldn't matter then.
How are they gonna bid the year-long project, is what I'm getting at.
Right.
Without some type of minimum hours that they have to work. You know, if they're gonna bid it for 300 hours of blade operating, or, you know.
I hate to open up another can of worms here, but there's something you didn't discuss. Snow removal.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes, because it wasn't.
Somebody, we don't think about that.
Thank you, Bob.
It should, yeah, we should. Yeah, and I think that was one thing when I looked at the contract, I struggled to understand. So a lot of times, let's just say if you're gonna have, and I saw that they use their equipment rate sheet, and that's fine, you know what they're charging. But when I talk about the maximum limiting amount of a contract, there needs to be like, hey, we only have $300,000, so you can't go above that. And that should be, there should be a correlation between the number of hours. So it's $150 an hour for X number of hours, if it wants to be, if it needs to be in hours. And maybe that's how you want the contract to be for this year. And it's kind of like, you get what you get, you know, like if somebody bids $100 an hour and somebody does 150, you just know that you're getting less hours of work if you end up utilizing one with a higher hourly rate. And if they didn't ever do a calculation of, like, I don't know how you would write a contract for that because I don't know how much the contract is. It seems a little bit open-ended. And so it's fine if you're going to have somebody as an on-call contractor for, let's just say, snow removal. We never know if we're going to get 20 feet of snow, like recently experienced, or no snow. And so I think, especially if you're doing snow removal, we should probably, you would have to quantify that in some way.
Would you put out a separate deal?
Do you want to, I mean, you can, and they could, essentially all of it could be a separate, you know, I don't know if it's him or they said that like cattle guard and culvert maintenance was a separate deal. You could do snow removal, you could do mowing, you could do, I don't know if it's hauling place gravel or if it's blading, or those go together, but you could partition it out to be each of those things. It would take a little bit more coordination. If you have, let's just say it's a good day to mow and it's a good day to blade, I mean, and you have two separate entities doing that, I don't know if that would ever happen, or if there's a situation where it would happen where they show up to do the same work at the same day and then they're in each other's way, but one would probably have to happen before the other. But, do you want snow removal to be a separate contract, or do you want it to be for separate bid, I should say?
That could be a good option to consider.
Thank you for putting me on that. And is that normally done as a number of hours or miles of road? I think it would have to be hours because not every road is going to blow shut. I mean,
Right.
all the conditions are going to be different.
20-foot drifts, it's gonna take a while to go through them,
Yeah.
so. Anything else? Okay.
Okay, so between now and next week, do you need more time to absorb what we talked about today? Is there anything, are there any expected, or not next week, the 25th? Are there expectations needed from my office? And I just need to know if there are, so I can ensure that we, before your next meeting.
You guys, before next meeting? If we do, we'll call you.
It better not be the night before, boo. At 10
Now I
p.m.
am, now I am.
I
I'll call you
answer.
too.
I answer because I like you guys, but
Did you roll your eyes when you seen that?
It's, I haven't seen my phone call.
I mean, with him, it could be my parents need to be picked up at the yard or something. Can't not take that.
Like a trigger. Okay, well, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you again.
Thank you, guys.
superintendent, there's nobody here for that, so.
If anybody wants the extra maps, I'll just leave them. And then if you want these for walls, the bigger ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you. Anything else?
Superintendent to the next meeting.
Yeah. Got it on there.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Clark.
are you ready?
For what?
Move your,
Move to adjourn? Put your motion.
Second,
that was my motion.
second.
Second by Dave, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Sure.
You had mentioned, once the bids were done, like after the 12-month period, they would have to recontract before hiring that contractor.
Jill already got that money.
So what?
That was $400.
On a new verbal contract.
You'd have
For
to.
$100,000.
Oh, there.
That was rescinded, like that's,
I think there is
it's a verbal contract, with verbal contracts to legislative body don't count.
Paper shop,
Count.
like Terry.
But they give it.
Last time was my stuff.
Oh,
Yeah, I heard something weird on there.
but I don't know what that amount is.
Thank you.
If you're extending, as long as they're. I should have. We're gonna pay.
Yeah.
They don't really
Yeah.
abide by that.
We already agreed to
Over budget,
surplus.
$500,000.
Did the value, what's the value gonna
Prior
be?
to the county. That's why you take it off.
That means you can just sell it.
More tax.
Double check, that means anything under $500 you can sell. We don't have to do a sealed deal
But there's no stuff,
or not.
like, no matter when you tell them, this is illegal, they just don't care, we'll figure out a way around that, so.
Whatever the appearance.
It's not.
That's my opinion, that it's the, you know, the appraisal.
Until the hammer
And
comes.
that's what it is, and, but it's, whatever, it's less than $500. You don't have to do sales.
But until the legislative audit keeps coming in every year and saying, we told you last year and the year before that, we shouldn't do it.
And sell it for
Hence the
whatever, you
reason
don't have to sell it for
petitions are going around,
double check.
and until it comes out of their own pocket.
So I would need to look into it more. I did read the issue, it did say that the,
Next week. It's coming.
Lane went out today.
Yeah.
It's coming. I mean, that's what they discuss here, so paper, so litigation is coming.
That's my.
I was advised to maybe say, I can do that if I'm not one of the engineers, I feel like.
Well, so we just need to tell them not to drive over.
We need to find out if it's in that.
I'll give you the phone number and you can call me out there.
Yeah.
Not to drive over.
No, I mean to tell you.
Again, we're neutral,
I know.
so we don't, but we are never going to put a county or city.
Yeah, so
in
maybe
that
it's maybe asking about fixing like
legally neutral.
we think of five because
It's expensive.
but for the future reference, they'll drive over.
Yep.
Maybe we should do something of a just a write up.
I can't hang around and I'm going with it. Not in the way.
A what?
Non-average meeting.
Oh,
3 out of 5 at the
You
meeting.
gotta know that.
oh, and
That
you're
show
an
that
adjourned,
you know not to do this.
or you've been adjourned.
Especially just if
Yes.
we're up there.
You want to sign my petitions?
I don't want to read it, I just want.
Late.
I
Threw one out.
thank you very much.
I appreciate it.
One is done.